All right, it was at the school board meeting where they actually had to make the announcements of the cuts. And there was a pretty big turnout. As you recall, it was pretty passionate, pretty divisive. Folks that were against it, folks that were for it. And at the school board meeting that Tuesday night when they made the cuts, it was Lisa Hines, Kim Pichetti, threw out flyers, said, let's try and pull together a booster club. And based on that, they scheduled a meeting for the following week. So probably 50 people showed up. And the idea was, okay, this doesn't necessarily have to be over. We can still provide the sports, provide the clubs. Just do it under a booster club format. So the following 2 weeks were filled with kind of sketching out the concept, but trying to pull together nominees for a board. Positions that they had come up with at the time were president, vice president, communications director, fundraising director, secretary, and then some specialty roles, athletics director, clubs director. And we ultimately pulled volunteers, I believe, one for each position. So the voting was pretty straightforward. And we pulled that together. And then from there, it was basically meeting every week for the entire summer until school kicked off on, I believe it was September 1st. And during that time, it was basically putting together the logistics for each and every club and sport. Obviously, there was all of the kind of the business matters that needed to be taken care of. So Denise Gilbert, our treasurer, had everything queued up and knew the steps to take. It started with incorporation in the state of Wisconsin. That moved into drafting and developing our bylaws, which we basically had to do from scratch because it was difficult to find a booster club that operated the way we did. Most booster clubs function sometimes as a bit of a PTO, sometimes just as a kind of pep club for the sports and fundraising for the sports. So we didn't have much to draw on in the way of an example because it appeared that this had been the first time it had been done in this format. So with that done, obviously obtaining insurance, again, everything was a bit unique. From the insurer standpoint, well, you're a PTO, well, you're a booster club, well, what do? You're doing clubs and sports, and it's conference sports. So a bit of the insurance needed to be somewhat specialized because we're dealing with volunteers who are with kids a lot, and that adds quite a bit to our requirements. A piece of that was having a pretty strong molestation and abuse policy, which is a depressing thing to deal with and draft together. Of course, background checks on all of our volunteers was something we had to put in place. And with all of that done, then we could finally submit our 501c3. The big challenge all along was that, I hate to say we didn't really know what we were doing, but we didn't have any basis. We had no history of anybody having done it, and nobody in our group had done something like this before. So it was a real learning process going through the 501c3 application, looking at each question saying, all right, will we be doing this or won't we? Because we didn't know. So those were all the technical details. And it all went pretty swimmingly. We submitted the 501c3. We had approval before we kicked off in September. And from there, I think there was one last logistic. I think it was maybe tax exempt status, some things related to taxes once we had the 501c3. So that was kind of the formation of the organization, which was handled by just a couple of members of our team. And the rest of the team set out on the organizational piece. We had to develop a new activities handbook, and then of course corral volunteers that were willing to commit to a full school year. Clubs were the tough one. The sports, because of the way they're set up by the Wisconsin Conference, those are basically intense 5 to 6 week windows. I was about to say we found it easier. I don't know if it was easier, but it was easier for people to digest, to say, oh, okay, 6 weeks, very intense, 3 days a week. And the fact is, a lot of it was parents whose kids were in the program. They wanted to see the programs kick off. They wanted to see them do well. So what we had in our favor was nothing, it didn't all have to be delivered at once. We knew softball season was kicking off first and foremost, so all of our energy went into pulling together the softball. And then the clubs actually didn't kick off, I believe, until late October. And so we were able to kind of cue things up, and what we did manage to do in the background, it was incredibly hectic, and up to the last minute, and we kept saying we delivered just in time, and nobody knew it was just in time, and everybody thought, wow, they had it so organized and everything was there, but I mean, we had clubs starting and sports kicking off where we had delivered just in time.